What if you were born to inherit billions but absolutely hated money? This is the story of a billionaire's heir who struggles with the weight of their family's empire, fighting against the very thing they're meant to take over. Can they escape the grip of fortune, or is it their destiny to follow the path set for them? In a world where wealth and power are often seen as the ultimate goals, one man was born with it all, and yet he wanted none of it. This is the extraordinary story of the billionaire's heir who hated money. Born into a life of luxury, privilege, and endless opportunities, he was expected to inherit the empire his family had built for generations. But instead of embracing the fortune that awaited him, he rejected it at every turn, causing confusion, disbelief, and scandal. As a child, he witnessed the greed, manipulation, and corruption that came with wealth, swearing never to fall victim to the same traps. Despite his father's pressure and the allure of a life filled with riches and power, he chose simplicity, humility, and independence. But in a world obsessed with material success, how does one find true happiness without money? How does someone who could have everything choose to have nothing? Join us as we dive deep into his emotional journey, caught between family expectations and his quest for meaning. His story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest wealth lies in what you choose not to chase. The family he was born into was a dynasty of untold wealth, spanning generations. His father, a self-made billionaire, had built an empire from the ground up, a global business empire that had its fingers in almost every industry imaginable. From real estate to technology, from media to luxury goods, the family name was synonymous with success, power, and influence. It was a name that commanded respect but also fear in boardrooms and luxury circles around the world. As a child, the heir had every material possession one could dream of. A sprawling mansion on the coast, private jets, cars that most people could only fantasize about, and an endless parade of high society events. His childhood was filled with the best private tutors, the finest education, and access to a world that few could even imagine. But with all these privileges came an overwhelming sense of expectation. From an early age, his father would tell him, "One day, all of this will be yours. You're the future of the family business." The heir was groomed for success, not as an individual, but as a cog in the ever-turning machine of family wealth. Every moment of his life was planned. Every decision was made for him. The family's legacy was everything. But it was precisely that legacy that made him resentful. In a world where his every move was calculated, where his future was laid out before him like an inevitable path, he began to wonder, what if he didn't want this life? As he grew older, the weight of the family legacy became heavier and harder to ignore. The pressure to conform, to take his place in the empire his father had meticulously built, was relentless. His every move was scrutinized, his every decision questioned. Even his choice of friends, hobbies, and interests seemed to be molded by the expectation that he would eventually assume control of the vast fortune. It wasn't just his father who pushed him. The family's advisors, the board members, even distant relatives, they all had their own opinions about how he should live his life. They made no secret of their belief that he was destined for greatness. But greatness, as they defined it, came at a cost. The heir couldn't help but feel trapped in a gilded cage. Despite the luxury and opportunity that surrounded him, he began to feel more and more suffocated by the very wealth that had been bestowed upon him. He watched his father, a man consumed by power and business deals, and he saw how empty his life seemed. The long hours, the cutthroat negotiations, the constant need to one-up competitors, it all felt hollow. By his late teens, the heir had already made up his mind. He couldn't inherit this life. He couldn't become the man his father had dreamed he would be. The more he saw of the corporate world, the more he despised it. Greed, manipulation, and betrayal seemed to be at the heart of every deal and every decision. He didn't want any part of it. His rebellion started small, skipping meetings, avoiding family events, questioning the values he had been raised with. But the more he resisted, the more the family pushed back. The heir felt himself slipping further away from the expectations that had been placed on him, but at the same time he couldn't shake the guilt. He was supposed to carry the torch of his family's legacy, but all he could think of was escaping. He dreamed of a life where his worth wasn't determined by how much he owned or how powerful he became, but by who he was as a person. The moment the heir began distancing himself from the family empire, the world took notice. The media, always hungry for a story, couldn't resist the drama of a billionaire's son refusing his inheritance. Headlines screamed about the young heir who turned his back on fortune and the rebellious billionaire who chose humility over wealth. At first, there was a sense of disbelief. People couldn't understand why someone would willingly give up such an opportunity. Friends who had once envied his life began to question his sanity. They saw him as foolish, spoiled, and ungrateful. Someone who had everything, yet wanted nothing. The wealthy circles that once welcomed him began to treat him like an outsider, as if his rejection of wealth made him less than them. But the heir didn't care. He wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. He wasn't looking for approval or validation. His decision wasn't about rejecting others' lifestyles. It was about rejecting his own. He wanted nothing to do with the socialite parties, the exclusive clubs, or the fake smiles that came with the life he had been born into. He craved authenticity, real relationships, real experiences, and money couldn't buy that. However, his decision wasn't without consequences. Friends turned into critics, and people who once praised him for his charm and wit now whispered behind his back. They saw him as a symbol of everything they despised, a privileged kid who didn't know the value of hard work. His family, too, expressed their disappointment. His father, once his biggest supporter, now viewed him as a disappointment, a failure to carry on the family legacy. The heir, now isolated from both his family and the world he had once been a part of, found himself struggling with loneliness. Despite the freedom he sought, the emotional toll of rejection weighed heavily on him. Was this truly the life he wanted, or was he just running from something he couldn't fully understand? The lines between what he truly desired and what he had rejected began to blur. Leaving behind his family's wealth didn't come easy, and it wasn't as simple as just walking away. The heir had been so conditioned by a life of affluence that even his simplest decisions felt overwhelming. The first time he found himself paying for a meal with his own money was a shock. It wasn't just the unfamiliarity of the transaction. It was the sudden realization that he had no safety net, no credit card that could swipe away his problems, no trust fund that could cushion the blows of life. He started small, renting a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood far from the luxurious penthouse he was used to. He got a job. Nothing glamorous, just a regular 9-to-5 that barely paid the bills. He worked hard, learning what it meant to earn his way in the world, to put in hours of labor just to make ends meet. It was humbling, but in a way, it was liberating. For the first time in his life, he wasn't judged by the size of his bank account or the label of his clothes. He was just a man like everyone else, struggling and striving for something more. Along the way, he discovered a new world, one that didn't revolve around money. He met people from all walks of life, people who didn't measure their worth by what they had, but by who they were. They worked hard, but they found joy in the simple things, spending time with family, helping their communities, living for the moment. The heir began to understand that happiness wasn't something that could be bought. It wasn't in the mansions or the private jets, but in the connections we make and the lives we touch. He also learned the true value of work, hard work, that is, not the corporate meetings or high-powered deals that his father was so immersed in, but the kind of work that made a difference, whether it was helping out at a local shelter or working in a job that didn't come with prestige, but did come with a sense of accomplishment. But as much as he was finding peace in this new life, the lure of his inheritance was always in the background. He wasn't running away from money because he hated it. He was running towards something else, something deeper, more meaningful. And in the quiet moments when he allowed himself to reflect, he asked himself the most difficult question of all. Was this truly the life he wanted? Or was he simply rebelling against the world he had been born into? Could he find a balance between his past and his future, or was he destined to walk away from both? After years of running from the expectations of his family and society, the heir came to a profound realization. His rebellion was never truly about money, it was about control. He had spent so much time resisting his inheritance, rejecting the life that was supposed to define him, that he had failed to see what was most important, his own agency. It wasn't wealth that had been the problem, but rather the way it had dictated his every move, his every thought, his entire future. As the years passed, the heir found peace not by rejecting money altogether, but by learning to make his own choices. He realized that he could have a relationship with money, but on his terms. He could choose to use it as a tool, not as a master. In this way, he reconciled his past with his present, no longer viewing wealth as an enemy, but as a potential ally in his journey for meaning and fulfillment. The family legacy, once a weight around his neck, became something he could mold into his own vision. He chose to take a leadership role in the family business, not out of obligation, but because he had learned the value of stewardship and responsibility. He didn't need to seek out wealth for the sake of having more. Instead, he saw it as an opportunity to create lasting impact and make a difference in the world around him. And so, the heir's journey ended not with rejection, but with a more profound acceptance of both himself and the life he had been born into. In the end, he discovered that true freedom didn't lie in avoiding the life he was meant to lead. It lay in accepting it and choosing to live it authentically. As he moved forward, he understood one thing above all. Sometimes the greatest wealth lies not in what you accumulate, but in what you choose to let go.